Thank you, brain, for blocking out the pain. No, like, I actually mean that, you guys. Our brain is designed to protect us. And sometimes we don't feel things in the ways that maybe we thought we would, or they start to bubble to the surface, and you're like, where have you been hiding? Welcome to the StayiN Wild and Well podcast. My name is Rin, and my greatest accomplishment is being alive. Here we talk about life's journey, the ups, the downs, the in-betweens, all things mental health, body, mind, and spirit. We share wild stories and keeping your wild alive while staying well. I didn't plan to do this episode, but as usual, channeled into me this inspiration this morning. I was like, okay, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to jot it down because this needs to be heard. This needs to be heard and this needs to be processed. So here we are. I'm speaking about my separation, and it has been a few months, and I'm sharing this because along my journey to, I want to say, recovery and healing and understanding the situation, understanding myself, grief has shown up in so many different ways, and it has been a catalyst in terms of the topics that I have shared on the podcast, mostly because as I'm moving through this, you're moving through this with me, and we're kind of doing this little dance together. But why am I sharing this? So I did a plant medicine journey, and I had set out with intention. And none of that intention was centered around moving through my separation at all. In fact, I had thought that the reason I hadn't been feeling so much intensity around the separation was because I understood it from a logical level. I can piece together why it happened. And for me, so much had happened in between that I saw it as a natural progression, and that me and my partner had slowly drifted apart. It had been years that we had been together. It had been over a year that there had been challenges. So I felt like maybe I just accepted it. So when I did the plant medicine journey, everything bubbled to the surface, and the tears. And that is one of the benefits of a plant medicine journey. And that's something separate that I'll talk about in another episode. But you are able to access grief that you didn't know lived within your body. And I'm a pretty vulnerable and open person. So when I say that I dive in deep into my darkness and feel the things, like, I really do. I think it's so important to not only honor the joy that we feel in life, but to also honor the pain and the sorrow and the grief and the things that we move through, the human journey and the ebbs and flows of the different emotions that move through us. So for my first plant medicine journey, I was so shocked and so annoyed. I was so annoyed because I did not plan to mourn my ex-partner. I did not plan to want to go into the darkness of the loss of my marriage and start to grieve it. I had my intentions set out. I had 3 solid intentions, and then the fourth one was like, lead me to the next step in my journey. But when you're on a plant medicine journey, it gives you what you need. So there I was moving along, and the tears that flowed and the things that came out along the way. I was apologizing to my ex-partner, and I was saying things like, I'm sorry I let you down. And I'm so sorry that I couldn't be good enough for you. I'm sorry that I didn't do better. I'm sorry that I didn't heal fast enough. The pain that was rooted in that grief, I didn't even know existed. And as I'm sharing this, I have full goosebumps over my entire body right now because, like, I feel for that part of me. Like, I hold so much space for her and compassion in a way that I would have never been able to before because of where I have been moving towards the healing journey. But why is this topic coming up right now is because I also went away for a silent retreat. And again, I had intention and things that I wanted to grieve and move through, things that were just sticky on my brain, some self-work, some things that I'd been carrying in my backpack. None of it was my marriage. And on the first day, it was like I'm looking around at this silent retreat and the tears start to flow because the memories of my marriage start to come through. And again, I'm annoyed. And that shows me, thank you, brain, the suppression of these emotions have been held in different parts of my body. And I've been moving through the motions because it is a protective form. 17 years with somebody is a really long time. We were married 9 years, 17 years together. That is more than half my life. That is more than half my life. And if you've watched previous episodes, you know that I had fallen into an entanglement, a situation with a beautiful individual who came into my life and caught me as I fell out of my marriage. And I am so grateful for that connection and that situation because I think that moving through the loss of my marriage at the time, without the growth that I've currently had, would have been unimaginable. Like, the grief that I have felt in the loss of my marriage has already been painful, but it would have been unimaginable because there was such a lack of worthiness. And that person who caught me when I fell out of my marriage was constantly feeding my worth. And it's so interesting because now that I'm outside of it all, I remember being in that situation with that person and thinking like, I'm here to guide them and I'm here to support them and I'm willing to move through this beautiful experience because they need guidance and they need somebody and they can't be alone. You know, the rescuer in me, like, who did I think I was, Miss Ego? Like, wow. Because as much as I was guiding this individual, he was guiding me in ways that I only see now. And when I felt so unworthy in my marriage, he was filling my cup up with worth. And though I wasn't able to receive his, I don't want to say praise, but the way that he was building me up, and I wasn't always able to receive the words that he was saying, I now understand why they were there, because I absolutely needed them. And now that this individual is no longer in my life, and my partner and I are no longer romantically together, I can see that the entire journey and a big reason why my marriage ended and why this situation with this individual did not continue is because the journey is a journey towards myself and my own worthiness that needs to continue to be built within. And losing that individual who held so much space for me as I was moving through so much pain was a whole other grief on its own. So simultaneously, I was grieving my partner and grieving this person. And my brain would bounce around back and forth. One minute I'm grieving this person, and the next I'm grieving my marriage. And even though I was in a place where I knew romantically I didn't want to be with my partner anymore, there was still so much pain and loss and hours of crying and learning to hold space for myself now that that individual who caught me wasn't there. Crying in my bed for hours and quite literally holding myself. I remember a specific time where I grabbed my hand like this when I was in bed, and the tears that flowed were so intense and like, again, like full goosebumps, and I'm like getting a little choked up, and it's because I remembered a moment where, like, when me and my partner would be laying in bed together, we would hold hands. It would be like, sometimes like, oh God. it'd be like at 2 a.m. and we would just reach for each other's hand. And while I was moving through the grief, even though like I understood and I don't want to be with him romantically anymore, and we both recognize we're different people, it was painful. And when I even tried to comfort myself, the holding of my own hand, like so empowering to be able to do that for myself, but also like so much pain. So much pain. And I'm coming on here to share this with you because in so many ways, our brains try to preserve and protect. And that's exactly what my brain had been doing. And even still, I'm not able to fully lean into the pain in the ways I want to. And so I'm sharing this with you because maybe you're in a similar situation where, you know, you understand that you're feeling some intense grief and pain, and you want to cry and you want to feel it, but you're not necessarily feeling it. This is the body's way and the brain's way of preserving and protecting. And this is where we have to sometimes turn to different modalities like silent retreats, plant medicine journeys, shaking it out, somatic movements, the cold therapy, breath work, because these emotions are locked in our bodies in different spaces and places, and we need to release them so we can start to feel better. So I do have notes and things that I've learned along the way that I wanted to share with you during this episode, because maybe you are moving through a separation or loss and you can resonate with some of the things I'm sharing. Or maybe you are in a space too where you're like, I'm not feeling the way I think I should be feeling. And I hate the word should, but we're just going to place it here for now because our minds attribute the word should to how we feel we should be living life. No matter who you are, you think that there's some way. So this may help you as well. And also, I think that there are so many layers and lessons within this episode that you might be able to grasp onto and connect into your everyday life in different situations that you're moving through. I think sometimes things are too painful to feel, and our brains and body lock them away. And if you are in a long-term relationship or connection, romantic, friendship, family, it's long-term relationship, generalized. The thought of not having that person in your life is so painful. And that is some of the pain that I'm still, I would say, moving through now. How do I continue to move forward without having this person who has been one of my greatest teachers not be in my life? So the thing about Jesse is that we started dating when I was 17 years old, and I started becoming unwell at age 18, and then by the time I was 19, I was 69 pounds. The OCD that I had drove me into an eating disorder, irrational and fearful thoughts around food. And I became so unwell that I was no longer present. And that ended mine and Jesse's contract relationship at that time. And he left, and I think he had to. And I remember at that time as well, I didn't feel anything. We had so many different losses and family members dying back to back year after year. And my grandmother had been living with us and had been diagnosed with lung cancer. There was a lot happening financially at home as well. There was just so much to feel. But Jesse leaving when I was 17 was a big catalyst into the beginning of my recovery journey. Had he not left, I don't even know if I would be here today. Because someone in my life who I consider like a soul mother, an angel that has come down into my life, We have earth angels everywhere, like the individual I said who caught me when I fell out of my marriage. She said to me in the toughest kind of love, and it was painful to hear, but I needed to hear it in that way for many different reasons. But she had said, "Look at you. You are skin and bones. Who wants to be with someone like that?" And she didn't mean it from the sense of like how I physically looked, but instead how I wasn't caring for myself or taking care of myself at all. And something clicked inside of my brain when she said that, because 17 years later, I could still hear her voice in my head today. And I remember saying to my mom and dad, "Let's go to the restaurant." Not only that, but I was petrified that I was going to die at that point. Every day, I had kept Jesse awake night after night when we were together when I was 18 years old. And there's pain in this, you guys. I would say to him, "Don't go to sleep. Stay up and watch me because I'm afraid I'm going to die." And he would. And if I opened my eyes and I noticed he was falling asleep, I would shake him and wake him, and I would say, "Hey, please don't sleep. You have to watch me in case I die." And he never, ever, ever complained. And he did his best. And he would go to work the next day super early. This is an emotional episode, and I did not expect this to come out. All right, we're back. So you might notice a little bit of a lapse in between my tears. Actually, as universe would have it, the camera decided to die. The battery decided to die. So I take it as universe was like, "You know what? You need to collect yourself, bring yourself back, get into the moment so that you can actually provide the information that you were looking to provide." So here I am, a little bit more centered from all the tears. So where I was leaving off is where I'm going to pick up from. So as I mentioned, I had asked Jesse to watch me sleep when I was afraid that I was going to die, and he did. And then he would go to work, and eventually we separated because I wasn't there. Like, my soul in so many ways had left my body. I was a shell of a person. I was very unwell. And where I'm going with this and why I'm sharing the parts of me when I was younger and what my relationship in the 17-year span looked like with Jesse is because it was very karmic. It was very written. The catalyst to my own personal journey. And when mourning Jesse and when grieving Jesse and all these parts that keep coming up randomly when I'm not expecting it, and the suppression of the mind and how it's all interconnected, it has been such a large part of my journey. So when Jesse left, and I mentioned being told, like, "Hey, why would someone want to be with somebody who's skin and bones, doesn't take care of themselves, doesn't love themselves?" It was an awakening for me to start to nourish my body again, to start to take care of me. I had nobody else but me. And I think that now I see, especially with where I'm at, I've always wanted to be seen, heard, loved. I always felt misunderstood. I always felt like nobody quite understood me. Reaching in my family dynamics and all of that connected to childhood. And then even in my friendship cycles, wanting to be seen, wanting to be heard, wanting to be understood, feeling misunderstood, feeling alone in this world. And from a very young age, I used to do a lot of poetry writing and introspection and looking at people and analyzing and feeling empathy, the empath in me. So I think when dating Jesse, him leaving back then was so required in order for me to start to take care of myself. And I see the pattern and the repeat in history in many ways now, I guess 15 years later, because we had separated for about 1.5 years, 2 years, I see now so much of the journey of Jesse and I together was him teaching me self-love in many ways, not from a knowledge-based perspective. And now it's like, okay, put that self-love into action. Take that lack of worthiness and put it into action. So the catalyst to the next phase of my journey. So I'm looking at my notes, and from my tears, they're all kind of washed out. He has been my greatest teacher. And when we were together, married as a couple, and back together for the 15, I was always seeking worthiness. I was always feeling like I just wasn't good enough. And I think that had to do a lot with the challenges mentally that I had gone through. And also, it's not my place to speak to some of the challenges he had when expressing himself or who he was. But we mirrored each other in a lot of ways. And he had things to work on that were triggers for me. And I see now, while we're not together, how those triggers are something for me to continue to get curious about, because the more I get curious about them, the more I see how it is something that I personally, outside of the partnership, actually need to work on. So with every loss, it's never all lost, right? There are things to take from it, and things to grow, and things to learn from. When I think about our time together, we were best friends. And as I continue to think about how to move forward in this journey, it's no wonder that the brain would be like, I'm not going to feel this. Like, how can somebody, it is quite literally like a death. How do we learn to separate ourselves from one another? And my deep desire to maintain a beautiful friendship isn't necessarily what's possible for him, and being able to step back and see that and respect that. And not only from that lens, but a question I keep asking myself, because I see the way I continue to show up in relation to him, is also, we create dynamics in relationship. And within those dynamics, can we show up differently? So the reason I brought you into some of the sadness and pain of when I was 17 years old and Jesse having to leave, and how torturous that was for him to walk alongside me in that journey. He was so deeply affected, right? And when he came back into my life, the 2 years that we weren't together, the journey continued, and he was growing as an individual, and I was growing as an individual. My mental health had changed significantly in terms of my health, and who I was shifted and changed significantly, and continued to. And that's where that growing apart sort of happened, right? Everything about who I was or how I've been has changed. So when with Jesse, he has been my greatest teacher, and when not with him, he's been my greatest teacher and lesson. He has a hardness to him. And I always said, you're my rock, you're my rock. And I see that now. It was like a balance, but that hardness was a tough love that really pushed me into loving myself. And my entire journey, when I said I was going to heal and recover, was I wanted to be a better girlfriend for him. And I think that's why on my plant medicine journey, I cried so much, because knowing that we had ended our marriage, when I sought out to be this healthier version of who I am today, I couldn't do it for myself because I didn't love myself at the time. And so One, it was that I wanted to help people one day, and my mentor had said, well, you got to help yourself first. And two was that I saw Jesse and we were just boyfriend and girlfriend then, and I said, he deserves a healthy girlfriend. He deserves someone to share meals with and cook with and have fun with, not somebody who's constantly in her head and constantly going through things. And at that time, I was just always beating myself up. And I can stand back and look at that girl and have so much empathy and compassion for where her mind was at. So I think that that deep-rooted trauma that we don't necessarily know is under the surface of everything really came out and showed me, oh, this is something you need to look at. There's more in here. But his tough love taught me that I had to take care of myself. But somehow I was still reaching to be cared for and reaching to be tended to. And I think that that has a lot to do with childhood and upbringing and the desire to want to feel worthy and the desire to want to be seen. And I talked in previous episodes that, I would buy my parents things and want them to see me and, praise me and love me, and I would do these acts of service in order to be loved. And then in my marriage, I would do the same thing. I would be in of service. So Jesse's hardness taught me to be hard and to take care of myself and pick myself up and dust my shoulders off and take care of myself. And his softness kept me reaching for more. And there were only parts of it. And so I remember always asking, like, do you think I'm a good wife? Is there anything that I can work on? And I'd make him his dinners and do the things and all of it because I wanted to and because I genuinely loved him. But also, I felt like if I didn't do those things, why would he love me? Why would he want to be with me? I felt like I had to in many ways. So I see that a part of the ending now is yet again another catalyst. Like, just like it was a catalyst to my healing when I was 19, it's a catalyst to push me towards self-love. I had said in meditation and out loud many times, I would lose everything if it meant freedom. I would let everything go if it meant freedom inside. And now I'm in a place where everything has been dismantled. And I have never been called more into my truth. I have never been called more into tending to myself, to finally take care of me without any distraction. And I don't think it would have been possible to be headed where I'm headed, to be where I am right now, stronger than I've ever been, still in my marriage, because there was so much, so many layers, lineage, ancestral woundings, traumas connected to childhood, things that I was carrying that didn't belong to me, that contributed to the way I showed up in my marriage, in that act of service. And not only in my marriage, like I've seen it in my friendships, previous friendships, not the new ones, but previous friendships, feeling like I had to be more of what I was in order to be loved. And like, I love her so much. And when I say I love her, I'm talking about like that inner version of me, that inner child, because she did not know what she did not know and does not know what she does not know. And I could see her, and I'm talking to her, and I'm listening to her, and I'm taking the time and instilling worthiness in her without needing it from any external force, without needing it from that individual who came in my life and also was a catalyst to start that journey off. And also to see that not being with my partner means that I have to take care of me. I have to sit down and take the time to nourish my body properly and lovingly, and to move my body, and things that I already did, but not to the fullest extent that it was required, and to know that I could just be without being anything. And it was so easy for me to preach this stuff. That's the other thing. Like, I thought that I was there. Like, that's something I want you to know as well. I have clients that I see on a regular basis where I would instill these things within them thinking that I'm there, but only until things start to dismantle and pieces start to fall, you're like, forever a student of life, because what you think you know, you don't know. And I realized I know nothing. And the second you think you know, you usually don't know. And when you realize that you don't know is actually when you're the closest to truth than you've ever been. So I'm sharing in vulnerability today with you because sometimes we go through such deep pain and grief, and we can't express it because it's too painful. And so a part of that lesson is that we do sometimes need different modalities in order to express those emotions and get them out of us. May that be plant medicine journeys, as I mentioned previously, breath work, movement, anything somatic to feel it, going away on a silent retreat in the middle of the woods like I did, because things start to surface that you didn't know was there. And I'm speaking on my behalf, knowing that Jesse, my ex-partner, has a lesson within all of this where he too is growing in his own ways. But I see how our journey has been so beautiful in so many ways. How blessed I have been to have this person. Ugh, see, I'm getting emotional again. To do life with. And I'm not even crying right now because like the marriage is over. I think like this is how passionate I am about people in general, is that like everybody we meet impacts us and are so much a part of the journey in terms of guiding us home. And he has been so much a part of the journey in guiding me home, like my home in here, to become the person that I am meant to be. And sometimes we have to say goodbye to a life that we have had or shared with someone in order to be that person. And I share that today with you because maybe you're going through something like this, or the release of something, and it is painful. But to understand that there is deeper meaning and deeper connection, and that it goes back. And sometimes I can get wrapped up in a life without him, and what's that going to be like, and how can we not be together. And I still love him so much. I will forever love him. I tell him, I'm like, I know this sounds weird. We're not together, but I will forever love you. I will forever show up at your bedside if you need me. When he gets into another romantic relationship and partnership, I mean, I absolutely have to separate myself. I'm not speaking romantically right now. I'm saying that how could I not love him? How could we not love each other? We spent so much of our life together. It is that I see and recognize that if I get wrapped up in the stories of my mind, the lack of worthiness that I had, and this speaks to the growth I've had since, which is why I feel so open and vulnerable to share. When we go through a separation, it is so hard to love ourselves. We start to look at ourselves, we start to beat ourselves up, we feel unworthy, we feel unlovable, we feel like what's wrong with us. And though mine and Jesse's separation was super amicable and we both had decided it was time to end it, that doesn't mean that you don't question like who you are and your worthiness. And we already know that I had a lack of worthiness even before the separation. But I now see, when I get wrapped up in these stories of he and I, that is again a distraction. All of the stories that we generate in our mind, whether that be romantic relationships, friendships, anything personal, really, whatever story that you are connecting to, is often a distraction from a deeper rooted pain that is being masked. In my case, if I continue to get myself wrapped up in a reality of daydreaming or creating negative thought processes and stories, and or beg to have him back, or when I'm feeling lonely, go to these places. If I wrap myself up in this space over and over and over, one, I'm taking away from my ability to move forward and move on, which isn't great because we do need to heal at some point or another. So I want to be clear that it is so important to go into that grief and feel it. Like I mentioned, when I was laying in my bed and crying and holding my own hand and taking care of me and loving me, like, yes, all of that still has to happen and you have to grieve and you have to feel, but also, if we get so wrapped up in the stories, we're actually pulling ourselves away from the work that needs to take place, which is the lesson behind what happened within the relationship. And when we are going through such pain and looking at a separation, it's hard to find meaning in why it happened. It's hard to find the lesson. Like, there are awful things that happen in this world. And if someone was to say in the middle of your grief, there's a purpose, there's a reason, you're like, F you. Like, I don't want to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that. But so much of the purpose that is generated through pain comes from what you do with that pain afterwards. So much of the lesson is what comes with how you manage the grief that you are moving through. And for me, in this journey, and the deep, deep, deep stories that Jesse and I have together, the beauty, the laughter, the pain, we had gone through, oh my God, I mean, quite literally over a decade of things, like a lifetime, it feels, of different scenarios and circumstances that you would experience within the human realm of, like, you know, finances, catastrophic, like flooding events, and health and mental health and death. Like, we have gone through the layers. And there's so much beauty in what was shared and so much growth. And so now I understand why my brain doesn't want me to feel and blocks it out. So I encourage you, if you know that there's something that doesn't feel quite right, perhaps your level of grief has to be going deeper, cellular, may that be different somatic modalities. And I truly, truly encourage you to think about, when you're ready, after you've done some grieving, what is the purpose? What is the lesson? And I promise you that purpose and that lesson has nothing to do with the person that you are no longer with. And it has everything to do with your evolution, your growth, and who you are becoming. The birthing, the death, the pain of the birthing, the darkness and into the light, the new version of you, and leaving that old version, the one that you're probably thinking like, oh, I wish I could just feel like myself again. I miss who I used to be. To let that go and stop living in the past, because the new evolved version is in the making right now.